Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon, Roy. Are you well?
A little tired today, but I'm bearing up. So we're going to look at this is our second unit of work, which we're going to look at the importance of being kind. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen with you, so you can see what I'm talking about. So there we go. So you can see that this is what I've got shared on the screen. And again, we're working through with you guys through Microsoft Teams, so we'll post all of this on there so that students and the staff can communicate and collaborate on this later on. So the shape of openness was a circle, and the shape of kindness is a square. It kind of gives us a nod towards the house with 4 rooms that we looked at in the last section.
Yeah.
But this is really about looking at how we can manage the balance between being who we are and respecting who other people are, how they see the world, and looking at that little point of contact, because this is one of the key skills that the students need about in terms of developing emotional intelligence, their emotional intelligence and their understanding of how other people work. And
so this topic's about developing relationships, but also building on the idea in the last video about the fact that we start off looking after ourselves, and then we start to look at building relationships with other people.
That's right. It's getting that balance right, but this time it's really focusing on what is our impact on others. And Claire Graves, in very famous quote, says, "Damn it all, a person has a right to be who he or she is." And it's about, yes, of course you have your right, but so is everybody else. And how do you get that balance right? And what we have here is Graves' levels. I'm just going to present this for a second. So when we start looking at the levels of neuropsychological development along this axis here, which is basically how our brains, again, building off on the neurology of how our brains develop, but also how that relates to our maturity as individuals, and that's the corresponding behaviours. And so what I've done here, I've just linked roughly the stages that we need to develop as we go through that journey through school. And for the most part, it fits roughly, because I really want to see whether or not the students understand whether or not their behaviour is appropriate to the level of development they are within school. Because a lot of the students, some of the students that we work with, occasionally sort of fall down into being their behaviour is more primary than secondary, and we all occasionally, throw our teddies out the pram. Well, what about those students whose behaviour on a daily basis is more fit to a reception class? How do you manage that?
So we're talking about students that shout out and interrupt the teacher.
Yeah.
When in sort of year 7, year 8, year 9. They're the students that won't let anyone else answer a question because they've got to answer every single question.
That's right.
Yeah, we're talking about the students in year 11 who try and distract the teacher by talking or refusing to do any work, or by starting arguments.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. And that we are as old as we act. Yeah. And as I say, it's acceptable every now and again for us all to, due to a whole variety of circumstances, to find ourselves not behaving as mature as we should. But for those students who that's their basic state on a daily basis, this is something that they need support in, and we need to have the right balance between support and challenge. So what I want to look at this in terms of the emotional development and maturity is also some practical skills for being able to engage in challenge and to deal with conflicts, so we can have the right balance between being able to engage and be engaged with. So through the family years, about getting the basic survival skills right, and then in early years, Graves would call this tribal level. It's actually building that sense of community, because the model shifts from a sense of me to we to me to we, as you know. But really, in early years, getting that family feel, and then you'll go into any early years classroom, and it's all about creating social skills, and but it's kind of quite low level social skills, but important nevertheless. And then when we move into Key Stage 1, they move, encouraging the children to move away from just focusing on the play, but also saying, well, what is it unique about them? This is the me state. This is the passion state. This is the, oh, I want to play with this. I want to explore this, and really encouraging that positive state of self-development. So it's a key stage. Sorry.
No, I was going to say. So what we're sort of saying here is that when students are constantly shouting out in lessons, they're actually, to an extent, showing sort of the same kind of emotional maturity as a Key Stage 1 student.
Not to an extent, absolutely directly too. Their behaviour is that of a Key Stage 1 kid, because they haven't developed, either wanting to develop, or they are using it as an excuse to prevent their own maturity by locking themselves into this state of being the worst manifestation of self. I mean, each of these have got a positive and negative, but when you see this behaviour in a 12, 13, 14-year-old perpetually, then that means it's the drive has become unbalanced and unhealthy.
And also, interestingly, if by using the techniques we discussed in the last video about sort of mindful breathing and stopping the stress hormones and catching yourself before you do these behaviours, actually students can take very quick and practical steps to change their behaviour. Maybe not instantly, but rapidly. It's one of the things that I noticed as a teacher since I started using the breathing techniques that we spoke about before, is that your gut reaction, I think it's a very human thing. Your gut reaction is when someone interrupts you is to confront them, which is what teachers end up telling students off for interrupting so often. And that's your gut reaction, but you need to overwrite your gut action and reaction by making sure your prefrontal cortex is operating correctly by using the breathing technique. So if I can change my behaviour to stop myself from confronting students angrily, then they can stop themselves from shouting out.
Yeah, and again, it is that quid pro quo in the relationship between the teacher and the pupil. It's not just one-sided, either just the pupil's issue or just the students. But when we move into Key Stage 2, this is like now preparing them for SATs, and they need to sort of understand structure and process and preparation and discipline and a bit more delayed gratification, and play by the rules. Now, again, the balance is, if the rules are excessive, then they should be challenged. But if the rules are there for the benefit of a wider group, beyond the tribe of early years, then being able to work in a social group is an immensely important skill for that student's employment opportunities, social opportunities, relationships, and unless we get this understanding that sometimes you have to play by the rules. Okay, but if you can't play by the rules, then you're going to find yourself in pretty challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
We also see negative behaviour, like the blue behaviour, in some of the students who have played by the rules. Now, this may be a challenge and a criticism of the system that we have, like we were talking in the last session a little bit about Carol Dweck. Some kids who really excel in Key Stage 2 and they really do play by the rules and they do the work and they get the grades and they get good SATs and they jump through all the hoops. But the negative thing there is they may just only want to do things whereby they know what the process is. And when we invite them into Key Stage 3, which should be, if we were developing it in relation to the natural evolutionary process of the brain, where the prefrontal cortex goes into shutdown mode. You know, the as we talked about yesterday, they had to start doing this separation from the family and from the group. Some of our kids who are particularly good in Key Stage 2 find it very difficult in Key Stage 3 because you're now saying innovate, create. Yeah, you need to know by the rules, but you need to sort of come up with some of your own. And this is a very interesting stage in terms of child development, because some kids will just coast through Key Stage 3, hoping that all they've got to do is focus and get the exam at the end of year 11. And I think some of our kids, they may do very well in Key Stage 3 in some secondary schools for the simple reason the culture of the secondary school is Key Stage 2. The actual culture of the building is just play by the rules and do this and do that. We're not actually developing some of the enterprise and innovation. And some of the kids are enterprising and innovative who then hit against a blue system are perceived as being naughty and disruptive. And then it becomes a failure of the system, not necessarily a failure of the child. And that's a really interesting conversation to be had. Is the system too blue? Is it actually pushing kids down the stages of development when it should be raising them up?
Right, that's a different conversation.
That is a different conversation, it's an interesting observation, because if we get the orange right, by the time they get to Key Stage 4, they should be self-motivated. They should be working more freely. This is a community stage, the collaboration, linking in with other people who aren't necessarily part of their tribe, aren't necessarily part of their normal social group, but they can work, they can collaborate, and they're really getting to a point of wanting to express themselves. But this is, if you get it right in Key Stage 3, if you get the enterprise and innovation and focus on the how of learning, when they get to Key Stage 4, they wouldn't have been blued out, with testing to the point of depression. They're ready for taking the exams. They're ready for taking the challenges, and because of the Key Stage 3 innovation, they can take them and they can take them and do well with them, but not if we perpetuate the Key Stage 2 mindset.
Yeah.
And so hopefully by Key Stage 4 they've got, but if they get to Key Stage 5, Key Stage 5 is it's the yellow, it's the interconnected, it's wanting to dig a bit deeper, understand the mechanics of it, how everything works, how everything keeps together. And ideally we should leave all students, and again I say this is a rough guideline, you'll get some kids with a yellow mindset, maybe even in Key Stage 3 or Key Stage 2 even. But this is where our focus should be. Say, okay, this is the mechanics of it. This is how everything thinks. Go out and do something. Get ready to go out into the world, which is Key Stage. Well, which is further education or further employment. And
so,
yeah,
why? This is a fascinating model. It's one that you can really easily see where you're at, and maybe you think, oh, wow, I wasn't behaving at my level. And there's loads of examples I can think of straight away of adults where they should have a very high level of emotional intelligence and maturity, but they're behaving like a Key Stage 1 or a Key Stage 3 student.
Yes.
Examples of footballers biting. We've got adults on Love Island behaving like it's their first girlfriend in year 9. Like, what is happening in the brain to make people regress in their emotional intelligence? Is it going back to the reptilian brain taking over from the limbic and prefrontal cortex?
Well, it's a combination of the yeah, it is. In essence, that's what we're being rewarded for, because we're geared as a species to move from towards pleasure and away from pain, and
Yes.
It's always a painful process to move through one level of seeing the world to another. It's always a difficult one. And the more mature you get, the more you can say, oh, I see the pattern now. Oh, I'm good at this, but I need to get ready for my next challenge, which is the hero's journey structure, its grades, its levels, it's the learning line.
Yeah, and now then instantly we can think, oh God, yeah, that's why people don't like moving from knowing what to do to doing it, because it's actually a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And But what we're trying to do on a daily basis in schools, even a lesson by lesson basis, say this is going to be a struggle. And if it's not a struggle, you're either coasting, you're stuck at your lovely blue level because you're just getting a bit better at what you're already good in. And we want you to be more orange. We want you to risk it, fail a little bit. But the challenge is when the individuals are surrounded by people who are predominantly at a different drive, they will feel, I'm not acting in the same way. I'm not acting in the way that the tribe, because all of these colours are different tribes. If you've got a really innovative kid, a really rule-breaking kid, in like an orange Key Stage 3 kid, but working in an environment which is very blue, the student can come across as disruptive. Actually, they may just be a little bit more evolved than the system that they're engaged in. And that's a really interesting conversation, as I say, to have, not necessarily here, but it is a very important one to say, well, is the system sufficient for the student as much as is the student as mature enough for the system?
Okay, well, let's have a look at some ways we can manage our own emotional intelligence then.
Okay, so we'll go back to our 4 rooms and developing these are 4 essential questions, again, which bring us back to the why, which is our spiritual intuitive, the who, which is the emotional creative, the how, which is practical applied, and the what, which is analytical.
And just to recap on the 4 rooms, they were the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
That's right. And so this is us working at a conscious level, but unconsciously all of these have been activated. And again, we need all 4 of these. And there's a lovely quote from Lao Tzu, who used the analogy of these, the room, to say, if you keep to one corner and neglect the myriad aspects of the totality, if you take one thing and disregard the rest, then what you attain will be little and what you master will be shallow. So if you're very good at the practical and the analytical, but you're not willing to explore the emotional, the creative, and in the intuitive and spiritual, you won't get other people. And it's about consciously recognizing that those 4 ways of being exist, even if you're not comfortable with that, if you're going to be able to engage in the world. And one way of doing that is just an exercise that we do, you've probably done this, is just exploring, am I really wanting to have a dialogue with you, or do I want to get into a debate? Because if I want to debate you, I want to close your questions down, and there I'm going to say, did you or do you? So if you've ever, I've done some work with barristers and barrister training, and the whole thing is that you're leading the questioning. You don't open into a lovely dialogue, a Socratic debate with a witness. So you say, did it not? Yes, or you really want to close them down to a yes or no. And if you really want to unpack how someone is working, you say, well, why? Who? How? And what?
The how and the what are particularly important open questions. They're probably the 2 most important ones. It's because when you ask someone how or what, it can release any tension in the conversation. If you're asking someone why they've done something, then it can often make people sort of go back on themselves a little bit. But if you're saying, what did you want to achieve by that, or how could we have done that better, then it often leads to much more intelligent but also peaceful and successful conversations.
It does. And it's interesting that the how and the what appeal to the analytical and the practical, and the why and the who are the intuitive and spiritual. And getting someone who's used to saying how and what and framing it with a why is, why do you think that happened? Or not, why did you do that? Which is, again, is how a how person would ask a why question. It's still, give me an answer here. Why do you think that happened? Who was involved in that? And there are these very simple, and again, simple doesn't mean simplistic. The most powerful truths, as I said earlier, are simple truths. So here's one interesting impact, if you can ask open questions, and the danger or the results of not being able to build rapport with someone. not being able to have a relationship where they feel that they are valued. So if you have this again, another square, and this time if you've got two axes, we like our axes, we like our squares, where you have rapport or no rapport, and you agree and disagree. If you agree with someone and you've built a rapport, you will come across as encouraging them. So this is why investment in terms of relationships between students and teachers is so important. It's not wasted, it's not lost. In terms of if the relationship, if you have no rapport, okay, that's interesting. My little clicker's decided not to work. Okay, so I think my battery's just ran out on my clicker. So if you have no rapport and no, there we go. So I just have to reload this. You will come across as patronising. So if you have built no rapport with the individual and exit pages. Now, Paul, I'm going to hold it there. I'm going to carry on the conversation. I can edit this bit out, but let me just. It's for some reason I just need to. Can you see that? It's just gone tits up. I will edit out the tits up comment in a second. So I'll just go back to the beginning of this one. As it loads up. Oh, that was going so well. We're in flow. Let's keep the flow. So. Here we are. Right, I'm going to reshare it with you, and I'm going to start explaining it from the beginning again. Going in 3, 2. So, here's a square. We like our squares, and here's our axes. And you can have, if you have rapport or no rapport, you agree or you disagree. So if you have built rapport, you've taken time and invested in building a relationship with that other person, that other teacher, that other student, and you agree on something, that's great, because then the whole dopamine kicks in, you come across as encouraging. And again, if kids are encouraged, that drives them forward to wanting to continue the work. Yeah.
When you have a positive relationship with someone, it floods your body with oxytocin, which is a hormone which makes you feel positive and happy. And there's a lot of evidence to prove that when we're positive and happy and we feel that we're in a positive relationship, that we actually learn more and deeper.
Well, that's right, because it's also the adds to the chemicals that sort of spark up the synaptic connections and the sustain that by supporting the linking with the brain with dopamine, which is with myelin. Sorry, dopamine in the brain, but also because of that desire to remember that encounter, to recall that layers that neural pathway with myelin, which is like it's like the insulation tape of the brain. So you can't underestimate the importance of having a good relationship and investing in a good relationship with people. That pays dividends. If you agree with someone or they agree with you, but you have no rapport, it comes across as patronising. So patronising is not a good state. Even when people don't necessarily have a conflict, they can just be irked by someone and don't want to spend time with them. If you disagree, and again, this is where the investment in building communication and collaboration and rapport is, even if you disagree, you come across as reasoning, you come across as reasonable, wanting to move things forward. And in many cases, if you've built up a relationship with students, back to the students behaving like Key Stage 1 when they should be in Key Stage 3 or 4, if you can challenge them, and you can challenge them because they know that you respect them and you've proven that in the past, and they're more likely to respond positively to a relationship whereby they know there is history and evidence of respect. If, however, you have no rapport and you disagree, you come across as critical. And if you come across as critical and you haven't built a relationship, then we go right back to the fight, flight, freeze, flock that we looked at in the first session.
Yeah,
And
heartbeat starts going,
totally.
Stressful conflict, the source of most problems in the classroom, and also most importantly, it shuts down the frontal cortex and learning stops happening.
Totally. And so it's an easy. So how do we get out of that then? So we get out of that by engaging in conflict transcendence, moving beyond the conflict. And this is not my model. This was shared to me. It's like the United Nations model of conflict transcend. And if you're having a challenge with someone, when you state, or sorry, when, don't necessarily make it when you, because you blame them. When this happens, when I'm trying to do something and you're doing something else, when I arrange an appointment for then and you arrive, whatever, say what it is. Say, and you see that links into the IQ. Be very clear what the issue is. And then bring your emotions into it before your fight, flight, freeze, flock, before your amygdala is kicked in. Say how you feel. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel sad. But then, and this is really important, because a lot of people get into arguments and say, you did this and I feel like this. And so because we agreed that we would meet at this time, or we agreed that when I did this, you would do that, or we agreed, whatever it is. If you haven't set up a relationship, if you haven't set up a reason, you haven't set up some kind of structure for why that person should behave like that, then you've got nothing to come back to.
Yeah, and this is a recipe for having challenging conversations, that if you can learn this at an early age, this will set you up for the rest of your professional and personal life. I've had to have so many. Well, when I was younger, actually, I would actually avoid conflict at all costs, and I would avoid having any kind of challenging conversations. And you often walk away from situations either feeling regret or shame that you haven't sort of dared to do it, or you actually can cause permanent, lasting damage in relationships because you haven't had the conversation. So as soon as you learn that this is a recipe that 9 times out of 10 actually have the desired effect, it's almost a magic recipe, and it's amazing the change that it will have on your life.
I couldn't agree more, and this is why this is a balance between structure and process, as well as creativity and flexibility, and it's a balance between the two. If you then say, there's a book written by 6th century Chinese general called The Art of War. His name is Sun Tzu, a classic management leadership book. And he said you should never put your enemy in a position where they cannot retire with honour. You're not there to shame that person. You're not there to make them feel stupid. You're not there to say, I'm bigger than you are, which is a reptilian, like 2 lizards having a fight. But you say, so what can I do? What can we do? What can you do? And you give them a way out. And usually the response, I would love to say that this happens hundreds. It's successful in every case. It's not, because you have some people who just don't want to change.
And that goes back to the graph we looked at earlier with the levels of maturity.
Yes, it does. So if you can, very important point, if you can only do the first two, when this happens, I feel like this. But you can't put a because and you can't give a way out. It's not their problem, it's yours. When you come in the room, I want to slap your fat face. Because, no reason, it's just, that response that I have to you. And a lot of kids, back to our key stage 1 mindset, will say, you made me feel bad. No. If you are working as in enterprise and community, you'd recognize that other people are not responsible for your emotions. Get over yourself. And this is a sad thing because they genuinely see the world like that. They genuinely see the world as if it's having a go at them. And so it's part of our educational journey to say, no, you're not. You need to outgrow that bit and go to the next bit. You need to go beyond self into order into enterprise to community.
By which you mean the different key stages on
the different key stages, the different stages of maturity. It's awful seeing an adult, and I've worked with a lot of adults who think that their pay grade is equivalent to their IQ, is that they are awful in terms of their relationship with other people. They can be brilliant at their jobs, knowledgeable in their subject area, but just terrible as people. So that's it, really. I think that this final quote is from Stephen Covey. And again, we're going to touch a bit more on Covey's work when we start looking at the learning. And he kind of sums it up. It's like, first seek to understand and then be understood. Mm-hmm. And out of those two circles, don't start off with yourself. Start off with the other. How are they seeing the world? How are they experiencing the world? What level are they on? And how can I help them to engage? Yeah. So that's it. So we'll post this onto Teams and post a challenge for the students to reflect on this and say, what are they going to keep, develop, let go? And these marginal gains that we're introducing to the students are incredibly powerful. And I know that you set up, as part of the conflict transcend curriculum that you're working on, is the check-up, the check-in, check-up, check-out. Mm-hmm. And getting the students to have a restorative circle and the staff. If that becomes part of the culture throughout the whole school, what do you think that the benefit would be to have embedding that state on the Monday morning where everyone just says this is what's been going on and this is how I feel? What do you think the benefit to you as a culture would be as a school?
Well, so many elements of the videos that we've been making tie up into this, but it touches really nicely upon all of the 4 different rooms. I mean, it builds positive relationships, which leads to rapport, which leads to better self-esteem, and which leads to better learning. It means that students can manage their relationships. It means that students can be more self-regulating. It means that they've always got someone else to talk to. It gives them practical steps. And they'll be able to see the results quite quickly as well. So I think it touches on all 4 rooms.
It's a great structure, and I'm delighted that you as a school and as a community are really focusing so much upon the behaviours and understanding the behaviours of the students, and for them to understand the behaviours of each other, and creating time to check in, check up, check out can't be underestimated. Anyway, thank you very much. I will see you at our next conversation.
All right, take care, boy.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.